Hi there. Welcome to the Writer's Desk, the podcast for the Inheritance Gambit. I'm Serenity, and thank you so much for joining me for the next little while we talk about our thoughts and ideas for how and why we put our game together.
Hi, I'm Reliant, and with me is Rocinante, our head of creative direction.
Also defined strictly as workhorse, but yeah, that too.
Right, so now you have their accents and you know who they are. And I'm Serenity. And I get to facilitate these two. So let's get to it. Guys, why this world? What drove the reason for the Arks, the Phage, and the clones? We'll start with Reliant.
So a lot of our reasoning wound up being OOC, out of character. We've all staffed on comics games before. And when we're putting this one together, we put a list of things that we hated about staffing on comics games. The top of that list was kicking people off their character bits. It always created a lot of drama, even when it went well. And it didn't really get either us or the game anything. So one of the things we tried to brainstorm when we were coming up for the concept of the game was, what is a way that we can avoid ever having to do that? The answer we came up with was clones, which led to, okay, why do we have a bunch of clones of superheroes running around? The Genophage was one of our concepts that we ended up really liking. It's also a nod to Mass Effect, game that Rossi and I really like. And when I ran the idea past Rossi, he seemed pretty excited about that, if he wants to comment on that a little bit.
Hells yes. Mostly because of the aforementioned Mass Effect nod. I love me some ME.
So mostly the answer to that question is we're all massive nerds and we hate confrontation.
There you go. And the Arks, tell me a bit about the Arks.
That actually came out of a conversation with Rossi and I. I was asking him who might be behind something like a cloning project. And he gave me a few names, not all of which I'm going to mention right now, because some of them are sort of important to the setup and things that we want to reveal over time. But the idea of a set of facilities prepared to repopulate the Earth with mutants, set up by someone who really, really, really freakishly likes mutants, was basically Rossi's idea.
So, Rossi, what do you have to say?
This is pretty much the only reason I'm allowed on the game at all.
So, Rossi is our creative guy. He's not allowed to touch the technology.
I'm also not allowed to touch the technology.
Yeah, but that's for different reasons.
I am the encyclopedia of nerd knowledge. That's my entire purpose here. Honestly, I just think that the concept was original enough that I didn't view it so much as a game setting, which I know is going to sound horrible coming from a pseudo-staff member, but I didn't see it as a game setting. I saw it as an Elseworlds comic arc, a trade paperback that I would write. A giant like fanfic meta arc that I would put in place. And once I saw it through
technical problem.
Ideas, just to build a giant outline as if I were going to build my own story. And then from there, you guys, shut me down on stuff that was stupid.
Or adapted things that we needed to actually make it into a game setting.
So just to put it into perspective, there really were no dumb ideas. There were just things that we decided we didn't want to do.
Yeah, fuck you, High Evolutionary.
Oh, man, that guy. Oh, that guy. So, speaking of just briefly the band list, there's a lot of things that are there for mechanical reasons. The system we're using handles a lot of things well, but one of the things it doesn't represent well is power curves on the level that comics often displays them at. That's one of the reasons, aside from the fact that we don't want them, that you don't see things like a Magneto who can cause all of the nuclear weapons on Earth to rocket into the sky on their lonesome.
Less worried about nuclear weapons, more worried about Asteroid M.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But there are some things on the ban list that are there purely because we hate them. One of those things is Deadpool.
Yes.
And another one of those things is the High Evolutionary, just because on top of dealing with mutants and genetic engineering and vats full of clones, the last thing I wanted to deal with was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I was going to say a game overpopulated with furries, but sure, that too. Let's go Turtles.
Okay, so it's clones. Anyone can play any mutant as long as it's not on our banned list, right?
Pretty much. The game is the game setting is designed to be very wide on purpose. One of the things that I think everyone would agree that we're very big on is letting people play what they want. One of the things I always hated on other comic games was the idea that you might be playing a feature character wrong. Partly because it feels bad to me to tell a player that they are playing their own character wrong, and partly because the interpretations over the years of long-running comic characters are so varied that saying something is right or wrong is almost always someone's opinion based on the bits of the characters that they like or didn't like.
Excellent. So the question that I get asked a lot is, there's already a Jean Grey on the grid. Can I be Jean?
Sure. Well, I mean, you can't be Jean. Much the way that Rossi, who has a clone, couldn't be that clone's original identity. There are other reasons for that. That particular original still running around. But the trade-off to allowing anyone to play a given thing is that no one can play the thing. So there is no the Jean Grey, there is no the Cyclops. The ones of those that are exist, and I got this list from Rossi. It's a fascinating list, actually.
Sentinels. They're the best.
The ones of those that do exist, kind of like Wonder Man, the people who don't take cloning well, they're NPCs. We don't have actually the system at the point yet where we can sort of have them rentable so that people can check them out and use them, but we'll get there.
Okay, but it's not just the mutants that are running around the grid either, is it? We have some shield agents that people might recognize.
Yeah, the name of the game here is replication. If you present a concept that is not an original concept, the question that we ask, and the question I go to Rossi with basically is, could this character reasonably be cloned or digitized or something? Now, for the vast majority of them, the answer is yes, but I get surprised a lot because I am not nearly the comics nerd that even some of the other staffers are. So sometimes Rossi will come back and tell me that no, duplicating this character doesn't work for a variety of reasons.
So, Rossi, I know you had some thoughts on digitization of characters. Why would I digitize a scientist as opposed to having them cloned?
Well, because a clone's lifetime is limited. In theory, okay, from a strictly creative standpoint of somebody who doesn't give a crap about the system and the game, seeing it from my nerdly, I want to make this a comic book point of view, which I really want to make this a comic book, just so we're clear. This has got Elseworld stamped all over it, and it makes me just all tingly. Is that traditionally scientists, specifically in Marvel, aren't cloned. Why would you bother cloning yourself if you're a scientist in Marvel when you can always just transfer your consciousness to something else? I mean, Armin Zola is literally the perfect analog for this. If you can just keep your consciousness alive, then you just accumulate knowledge. You start cloning yourself. You start making copies. They all start from zero until we start doing some altered carbon stack transfer body popping clone stuff, which I'm hoping we avoid for a while because it's got my head spinning upside down.
The other case that Rossi made to me was that intelligence isn't inheritable. I mean, there factors of it are, but like you pop a clone out of Reed Richards and you're not guaranteed to get a genius.
Exactly. It's not. While portions of it are, of course, genetic, that doesn't mean that they will. What is the word I am looking for? They will appear in the same way. The next Reed Richards may use his genius in another way. He may become the greatest painter the world has ever known.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is
Analytically logical painter of all time. That's great, but kind of not that cool for a Fantastic Four member.
Yeah. Piotr notwithstanding, painting kind of not a superpower.
Okay, so why did we choose Chicago, guys?
Well,
it's the best city ever.
It is an amazing city. It's a wonderful city. It's got wonderful food. It's different. I'll let Rossi go into some of this, but one of the big things for me that said Chicago was a lot of comic games have set on the East Coast in New York or around there, which makes sense. The X-Men are from the New York area. A lot of the canon Marvel stuff happens in New York, so it's sort of the comics' natural habitat. We just didn't want to do that.
Basically, all comic books originated in New York City because the people who invented comic books, shocker, from New York City. I mean, most everyone who was making anything was from New York City in 1930, 40, whatever. The few people that weren't were in Hollywood, and they were too busy making black and white noir films. Thank God for those. But it was a different thing entirely. Plus, it's really hard to have a character like Spider-Man in L.A. I've been to L.A. You have maybe 3 square blocks where he could zip line around, and then he's just trying to, web from one 3-story suburban house to the next forever because LA goes for like 1,000 miles in every direction.
Or catch a semi truck on the 405 and then
just exactly. He's just going to ride PCH for all time, just chilling on top of a van. So like it works for what they wanted. New York City is close, it's compact, it's built vertical, not horizontal. It's got massive sums of humanity in tight quarters. Dramatically speaking, it's a wonderful city for that reason. That being said, we're kind of done with New York. That being said, we're also kind of done with LA, honestly, because
LA is the other coast, New York, pretty much.
Yeah, and the geography, everything about it, it just doesn't lend itself well to the same sort of storytelling. It's too, for lack of a better term, it's a great cinematic setting. It's a horrible superhero setting. It just doesn't function as well. Chicago is our happy medium. Ironically, it's also geographically located in the middle. Chicago is the one place that has everything, but not too much of any one thing. It is our Goldilocks city. It has a massive section of downtown, big sky rises, lots of stuff from Spider-Man and his ilk to fly or swing or float around on. Then you've got lots of urban sprawl. You've got tons of high crime areas. You've got ships. If you've never seen a Great Lake in your life.
I'm going to come back to Chicago in another episode because there's lots we've got to cover there. But really it is, we wanted something in North America.
Most of the new player base is in North America. And when you're setting in large urban environments, it really, really helps if it's something that if they haven't been to, they can Google.
Absolutely. And in case people can't tell by my accent, we did want to set it in Australia.
Only you wanted to set it in Australia.
Well, yeah, and then I couldn't decide which city.
Right.
So we're going to come back to Chicago in another episode because there's lots to cover there. What I do want to ask you guys about is what type of characters players can have. Because there's mutants and there's digitized consciousnesses. What else can they do?
You can really do a lot. So speaking from a systemic point of view, the system supports most concepts. It's really a question of what the world supports. We let people app pretty much anything that isn't on our banned list. With the understanding that this is a mutant-focused game, so it will help your RP if you have some hooks into that. But you certainly don't have to be a mutant. You certainly don't have to be a recognizable name from comics. You can be an original character. You can be a human being. You can be a cyborg. You could be a robot. You could be an AI consciousness. There are a few things that exist on the grid that probably aren't very suited for player character. Well, exist in the world, but probably aren't very suited for player characters. Inhumans are still out there, but they're still on the far side of the moon, hanging out, doing
things,
whatever Inhumans do with giant dogs and no space. Atlanteans exist, but as Rossi has pointed out to me, Atlanteans in the Marvel canon don't breathe air, and their hybrids have this really distressing tendency to go insane.
And then Superman level a city block or two, yeah.
So that then leads me to my next question. Magic doesn't exist.
Magic does exist. However, because it's a mutant-focused game, we made the call that anyone left who was wielding magic does so because of a mutant power. So they have some sort of genetic, API basically that lets them hook into an extra dimensional power. It's likely, although I don't think that Rossi and I really hashed this out, it's likely that at one point in this world's history there were more traditional magic users. Your Doctor Strange probably wasn't a mutant. Your Victor Von Doom, who's still around, probably isn't a mutant. But most of the people who had the knowledge and ability to manipulate magic without the aid of a genetic crutch are gone.
I just voted against magic in general because I hate magic. So
yeah, which made our magic player really sad.
It's the Deus Ex Machina of lazy writing.
It really is, though.
And it always made me frustrated that it continued to tie mutant storylines, which are set in, well, very loosely in the concept of evolution, the heart of biological sciences, with the mystical hoo-ha of I make a hand gesture and, oh, look at that, we're teleported to another dimension. Which
Yeah, the one way we were able to sort of reassure Rossi on that was by demonstrating that the very fact that we were using a system would limit the amount of BS that came out of the magic people.
The system really helps a lot.
A magic character, but it's an expression of their mutant gene.
Yes, any mage that you are likely to run into, and certainly any mage that is played by a player, is a mutant, a la Ileana Rasputin or Scarlet Witch, or there's probably a few others. There's a necromancer out there, his name I'm forgetting. Wicked. No, not Wicked. Something.
Wither,
thank you.
There we go. And that's why we have Rossi. Okay, so moving it forward a little, people are going to want to know who or what created the Phage, and you've touched on that a little. More importantly, can they run plots around this?
Yes. So on our website, there are policies for running plots. The cop-out answer would be go look at those. The slightly more involved answer is you can run plots that deal with them, but for something like the Phage specifically, you can't really change it without getting our approval first. The Phage is central to the way the world is set up. Humanity is dying out. Mutants are poised to take their place as the new dominant species on the planet, and curing it would sort of leave us out a meta plot, which we don't want. Absolutely.
So yeah, fill your boots, guys. And there's a very Australian term for you.
We're going to get a boot for you now.
Don't buy me a boot. But go run some plots around it if you want.
Boat? So like you're Canadian.
Don't.
She said it knowing what was going to happen, and she said it anyway. I don't understand.
And now they're just going to pay me out. We've got a couple of Wakandan players on the grid, or characters on the grid. Is there a natural source of vibranium?
Well, I'm actually going to let Rossi field this one because I'm pretty sure he's got a good enough handle on our timeline, and he knows more about Wakanda than I do. So, Rossi, the vibranium supply.
Okay, so traditionally there is no natural source of vibranium. It's a meteor that landed. Big, giant vibranium mountain. Well, mound, I guess. Mountain's probably giving the wrong idea. After the fall and all of the frou-frou that led up to that, F.U. Genosha, what's left of the vibranium, or at least what's accessible, it's not naturally occurring. It still exists where it exists, but it has been spread somewhat globally. I mean, with the fall of Wakanda, it was easier to get to if you had known where it was originally to begin with. So your Dooms, I suppose, your Hydras, the big characters might have gotten a few, pounds or whatever of it out directly after the fall, before everything got completely lost and buried in whatever. So there shouldn't be that much vibranium running about the planet at all. In fact, significantly less than there was before.
Right. So you're talking about a situation where the vibranium supply is a zero-sum game. If you get some, you've almost certainly taken it from someone else.
Exactly. There is no continuing source of this stuff. Even for the Wakandans, it's too lost. It's too buried. It's too gone. Getting to it is too dangerous. The characters and the things around it, you're outnumbered and you're outgunned. And unlike before, there is no order. There is no government. There's no control. So, and what's out there is out there, and that's all you've got.
The people who are nominally in charge of Wakanda at the moment anyway kind of hate everyone. So there's that.
Very true.
So there are some supplies, but you're going to pick them up from someone else.
Basically, all of the vibranium that's left is in artifact form now. So, like, it would be as if your supply of vibranium was in World War II. They made 50 Captain America shields, and that's all that's left. In order to get one, you have to take someone's cap shield.
It may change shape. If you have effectively high enough science or capability to do so, you could change shape shields into Warpath's knives or Black Panther's suits into, I don't know, super slimming vibranium corsets or whatever you're into. But changing shape doesn't change the amount of it that there is. It would be processed like platinum is here in clean rooms that air blast the dust off of you before you could walk in and out, because it's very grams of it are too valuable to be wasted.
Excellent. So last topic for this week, and we'll cover more later, but what is the coalition and what is the status of Europe?
Right. Okay. So at a very high level, because we'll cover more of this later, the events of our timeline caused a massive geopolitical reordering of how the world works. The two major remaining power blocks in the world are the EU and the coalition. The coalition is the US, Canada, Mexico, Australia, Korea, Japan, and Britain. And those are the major countries involved in it. There's probably a few I'm forgetting somewhere on one of my lists. The European Union is what is left of Western Europe, what is left of Eastern Europe, which is now mostly under Hydra's control, and probably Russia on some level. And that's kind of it as far as large power blocks are concerned. They don't like each other very much. They have fundamentally different ideas about how to deal with the fact that humanity is dying out. And they have fundamentally different ideas about how to treat mutants. Importantly, in the coalition, the mutants and clones are legally people, and they have human rights. Doesn't mean that everyone likes them, not by a long shot. Doesn't mean that people don't think that they should have human rights by a long shot. But legally, mutants are on pretty solid ground. In the EU, mutants and clones are not people. They're the property of whomever creates them / finds them, and they are used as such.
Did you want to add anything to that, Rossi?
Not really. Genetic material can be owned, but the people that make up the genetic material cannot in our North American republics. Outside of that,
he is correct about that, by the way. Republics too.
Republics.
Yes. So North America, the fans of the cyberpunk genre will know that it's a pretty common trope to have large nations balkanize, break up into competing sub-factions. When you play Shadowrun, this is where you get your UCAS and your CSA and Pueblo out in the west, and Oregon turned into Elf Country, which it pretty much already is.
No kidding.
We didn't go quite that far for Inheritance Gambit, but the administrative difficulties of dealing with very, very large, very densely populated urban centers has caused the government of the U.S. to fragment. It's still one nation, but it is now comprised of two republics, the Western U.S. and the Eastern U.S., each of which have a president, and then there is a president of the U.S. in toto over them. So there are actually three presidents of the United States.
So there's some good stuff to be had around that as well.
Yeah, stuff we should probably put on the website at some point. I'll get to that.
Eventually, we'll get there. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up for this week. Thank you two for being here. do you have any final thoughts
No,
before
just
I close this down?
thank you, Rossi, for joining us from Tennessee, and thank you for joining us on this much endeavor.
So just to recap, that was Reliant. Say hello, Reliant.
Hello, Reliant.
That was Rocinante.
Howdy.
And I'm Serenity. Until next time, guys.
Thanks for joining us at the Writer's Desk, the podcast for the Inheritance Gambit. If you've got any questions or anything you'd like to know about the game and why we put it together, please drop us a note via the website www.inheritancegambit.com.